Hey everybody, welcome to episode 2 of the Combat Chain podcast. I am your host Adam Filipchuk alongside Andrew Podleski, and holy do we have a lot to talk about today. It's Sunday right now, so we just finished up, I think 12 different events. We had 10 nationals, we had a calling, we had a pro quest. Yeah, there's a lot to dip into there. On top of that, we'll be touching quickly on the ruling from LSS from the controversy from last weekend's UK Nationals. But before all that, Andrew, how was your week in Flesh and Blood?
Hey, good, man. Thanks for the introduction. So, to recap, saw you Tuesday night at Blitz. I've been dying to your spicy Kano list in every Blitz event around town, so I thought I'd be smart and bring this aggro prism list just to beat you. And I take down round 1, take down round 2. I've got to win round 3 to probably see you in the finals. And then I lose round 3 and I'm kind of salty. I'm not going to get a chance to play you with the deck that I brought just for you. And then you went and lost too. So now we're both playing in round 4 in the X1 bracket. And I just lost to you anyways. Just went 2-2. I should have just brought my own deck. And then Wednesday, played some CC with the deck I'm going to bring to Nationals, and we won again. So that makes me 17-0 in CC since some recent changes. So I hope that keeps up, keep running hot during Nationals. We had to miss Thursday out in Leduc because I was playing my hockey. And then not Fab related, but holy smokes, that Edmonton Oilers hockey game on Friday night?
Yeah.
That was like the best hockey game I've seen in a long time. That comeback was hype.
Well, I remember, so Brooklyn's brother and dad were lucky enough to get to go to that game.
Oh my!
And I remember it's actually it was Brooklyn's brother's first Oilers game in person, and I remember texting Brooklyn halfway through the second period or something like that, and Oilers are down 4-1, I think, yep. And she's like, "Oh man, worst game to ever to get to go to," and I was like, "Just be patient, we'll see what happens." Yep. And then that huge comeback, that was
so hype. I was screaming. I was off my chair, just so stoked.
Yeah, that was good. But yeah, so you said Thursday night you were playing in, you missed our Thursday night armory because you were in
playing my hockey.
Yeah, and Thursday night I brought out my Kano list again, and I'm all cocky at this point because I think I've seen maybe 1 or 2 losses across like 3 or 4 events, and I ended up getting a round 1 bye, which I think was my only win. Round 2 goes to a draw, and then round 3 I get smacked around by an old him. So it was about time I probably saw a losing streak with that deck, because it's been lucky so far.
Yep. So did you unsleeve it, throw it out the window?
No, I haven't unsleeved it yet. We've actually got the Battle Hardened coming up this Friday in Toronto, and racking my brain trying to decide if I want to try to stick with this deck, this Kano deck, to play on the Battle Hardened, or if I could always fall back to Ira. I haven't played Ira in actually. Talking about Ira, I did get to play some Ninja recently because we had we did a team sealed this past Saturday.
True, that was so fun. We teamed up with our buddy Kevin, and we drafted, or sealed pool I should say, we got 6 packs of Arcane Rising, 6 packs of Welcome to Wraith, and 3 packs of Crucible. Yeah.
So anybody who's not familiar with the team sealed format, it was a legacy format at this point because of Crucible going out of print. But the whole idea was it was a way to play limited with Crucible. So you would, in teams of 3, you would crack 6 packs of WTR, 6 packs of Arcane Rising, and 3 packs of Crucible of War, and you'd make 3 decks out of the combined pool of all the cards. And and you sit with your teammates and play each your own 1 versus 1, but your teammates can
help you out by talking to you. You can talk over plays, ask questions. Like when I'm done my game, I can come over and sit between my teammates and, watch them, see if I can see any lines that they can't.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I sleeved up a cool Viserai deck.
Yeah, we had you on Viserai, Kevin ended up playing Brute, Reinar, and then I slipped into the
old ninja ways.
Yeah, Katsu. Haven't played a bunch of Katsu in a while here, but that was good. And
we lost in the finals. We got absolutely dream crushed by the team of Hugh and Joel and Kale.
Yeah, in my defense, I went undefeated.
Yeah, you didn't lose.
But Kevin and...
I had a spicy one come down to the wire against Joel, and he was playing Bravo, and just almost every turn it seemed he had some sweet, dominated, crush, fancy attack coming at me, and I couldn't live, I couldn't survive, I let us down.
Yeah, you got to the point where he had the pummel, and you couldn't afford to play around the pummel.
No,
and
I was going to fatigue myself if I blocked for the pummel and discarded my last card in hand. That wasn't the way to win. I just wouldn't have a turn, and then I'd be out of cards. So
yeah, and there's just, at that point you've got to go for it. You got to risk it for the biscuit.
Yeah.
And then I know I was talking to Kevin about his match after the fact, and he was saying that his big thing, because he was playing into Hugh on Kano, and I guess Hugh was playing a bit more of like a hybrid battle mage style Kano, presenting both physical and arcane. And Kevin was saying that he let in some physical damage that he shouldn't have let in. He should have been blocking more of the physical damage because he couldn't block the arcane damage. So that was...
Yeah, he was saying he maybe could have played a longer game where he was blocking more and just swinging with the hammer every turn. Because he had some no rune gloves, he could be stopping some of the arcane damage.
Yeah. Play for that late game eventually. Yeah. Kano will fatigue himself.
Early game, it looked like it was going really well for him. I was looking over in the early game and he kept intimidating his opponent, so Kano wasn't able to, cast his spells on Kevin's turn.
Because a fun fact about the Intimidate mechanic, it's actually really good at shutting down Kano and Prism, because with the Intimidate mechanic, you don't get the cards back in your hand until after the end phase, at which point you lose your priority window. So if you want to go off and Prism cast an instant, or Kano off the top when your opponent doesn't have any cards in hand, you're not able to do that.
Yep. And then I got hyper focused on my game because I was getting clapped over here, and then Kevin told me he lost and it was all up to me. I was like, oh no, I'm not in a good position for that.
Yeah.
But that was fun. Congrats to those guys. Hugh, Joel, Kale, they took down the event 3-0, got all the prizes. And then today we had a nice fun chill day. We went to our buddy Reno's house and they cooked for us, and we got to draft a box of Tales of Aria just for some practice for nationals.
Yeah, that was good. We had actually, that one was funny because I cracked pack one, and I seeing like right away like some, I think I got runaways right off the bat on pack one, pick one, which is just that's a solid pick. And then from there I just kept seeing a lot of lightning cards and like some early picks for some really good Briar cards, and I'm like, is really no one drafting Briar? And as things went on, the Briar cards started to drop a bit, but then that's when I started seeing a bunch of Lexi stuff. Like I saw a late Honing Hood, and I just drafted the sickest Lexi deck. But meanwhile, you were on no, you weren't the only one on Old Him. Hayden was
also on Hold'em.
Yeah, but even at that, like, you drafted what looked like a pretty sweet Old Him deck.
It seems sweet. I first picked like a Weave Earth to try to stay open, and then I took some sort of Runeblade card, and then I just started seeing signs that Oldhim was just completely open, and I just picked so many Guardian playables. It was so fun. I hope Nationals goes that way, where I just instantly see signs, recognize my seat, see what's open, and just go with that the whole draft.
Yeah. Then like we said last week, like that's really for like in the draft portions of Nationals next week, that whoever does the best is going to be whoever like could just draft a really good deck in their in their seat, play their seat, draft whatever heroes open, and then that I think, which interestingly enough, the other takeaway from our draft today is then being also good at playing whatever deck you draft, because I know I got quite lucky. I 3-0'd the pod, and I know you won round 1 and then lost 2 and 3 after that.
I went 2-1. I just lost to you, and then played a couple more practice games with you after. It was great practice for me because Oldhim is like not my play style at all.
And that's where I was going with this, is that like we saw initially as you were playing Oldhim that you were playing more towards kind of just what you would feel comfortable doing, and it was, I mean, like, you still went 2-1 within our main event, so like that alone shows that you were doing something right. But like in our practice matches after the fact, like because I think we played 3, and the first 2 you were kind of throwing haymakers with me, and we, after the first 2 matches, we identified kind of what you need to do to kind of play Oldhim to his most optimal fashion. And when we kind of talked over that and you made those adjustments, you absolutely creamed me. Like, I didn't even stand a chance in that third match we played.
Yeah, I figured that game flowed a lot better, but I certainly figured out what I was doing wrong.
Yeah, like I
feel bad. I think it was round 1 though. I got to smack Hayden for like 5 or 6, and then turn 2 or 3 I set up just this gross swing for like 19 dominated.
That is gross.
She's like, okay, can't do anything about that.
Yeah, unless you're at 20 health and you can block with a card. Yeah,
no, there's
just or nothing. If you've got the turn Timber and Arsenal, maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. In limited sealed draft Tales of Aria, there's not much you can do to a 19 dominated attack.
No.
But just to finish touching on it though, like talking about the adjustments you made going into that third game, because I think it's kind of relevant going into nationals. What were the big, because like I said, like in those games we're playing after the fact, you and I in the first 2 games, like, we just kind of went back and forth exchanging damage.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I was fortunate enough to have Voltaire, which is going to play a huge factor in allowing me to pump out a lot more damage and incentivize me to just hold on to my cards and keep swinging back at you. But what was the big thing you tweaked in game 3 that really...
Well, at first I was kind of racing, or I was gambling on the setup turns. I was playing out a Strength of Sokoa or the Emerging Avalanche or one of the other setup cards that buffs your attack next turn, without an attack set up or lined up. So I was just throwing that out there, banking on drawing a good attack action that I could play in my next 4 cards. And that sometimes wasn't working out, or I'd have to block too much, or I ended up just kind of wasting those setup turns. And I was, just kind of playing that like race style beat you down game starting from turn 1. And game 3, the big difference I made was playing second and then setting up very slowly. I just played very controlling, blocking everything, setting up like 1 piece at a time, like getting the big setup piece in Arsenal or something, and then waiting till I had a good attack action that I knew I'd be able to cast to put that in Arsenal after playing the setup turn, and just sit there defending while I meticulously set up the big crush attack. And then I just had a much higher life total going into late game, so then I could start chipping with the hammer and stuff, and when Adam got to a much lower life total.
Yeah, and that was what I noticed, is by the time, because like I was throwing these big attacks at you at the beginning in that third game, and they just weren't, I wasn't chipping anything in. And then we reached kind of this pivot point where, and now admittedly, and I was saying this to Kevin after the fact, there was a point there where I had the Shock Striker, and I was trying to decide, do I Arsenal the Shock Striker or do I play the Shock Striker? And I inadvertently decided to Arsenal it, but I think that allowed you to hold on to some cards that you otherwise would have probably gave up on a block. And from that point on, I couldn't catch up, because that was when you came in with this Glacial Footsteps for 10 dominated, I think. and I took a bunch on that, and then I was just so far behind on health that you could take these huge hits and just keep swinging back with these huge attacks.
Mm-hmm. Another realization I had to make too was like, normally I don't like blocking in Flesh and Blood. This is not my favorite thing to do, but I had a bunch of defense reactions in this Oldheim deck, so I needed to realize that, you know, Adam's, some of his turns are going to be very wide, and that sucks for me, and other turns of his is going to be like kind of one big attack, and that's when I can just pitch a card to play a huge defense reaction, block for 7, and then come back in with like a very large turn. So having a higher life total farther into the game really gives me time to play around with that.
Yeah, and I think going into this coming weekend in Toronto, for the draft rounds, the person who can adapt to the play style of their hero, along with it, like if all things line up for you, if you draft a great deck in your seat and then you're able to sit down and play that hero really well, like everything should work out for whoever that person is that does that, or the people who do that well. That's going to be where they're going to really stand out. I mean, if you do that, if you're a person who can do that well, that's gonna be those draft rounds are gonna be so easy for you.
Yeah,
and
especially when you're going into like the top 8. That's the pot of people that you're gonna play against. So that's when the cards that you take like definitely affect what they're doing. And if you can really like be open. Like sometimes we see one person end up on Lexi and the other 7 players are all fighting over like Briar and Oldheim.
Yeah.
And that's when they have like this sweet Lexi deck and the other people haven't taken a lot of Lexi cards to punish them.
And I mean, some people draft what they're comfortable with. Just to like quickly mention there, I think you mentioned like the top 8 draft. I think the top 8 for our national, actually all the nationals are played in played CC. But I believe you draft, because I know for sure for the UK it was the 3 rounds CC, 3 rounds of draft, 3 rounds of CC. Day 2 started with draft rounds, and then it was the top 8 finished in CC. I think
maybe it's the ProQuest I'm thinking of on the Sunday where you start with sealed and then the top 8 I believe draft.
Yes, yeah. The ProQuest for our
Canada Nationals.
Our Canada Nationals in Day 2 is formatted that way. I believe you're right. Because in traditional fashion, we've seen the ProQuest for any big event always be usually the opposite format of what the main event was. Mm-hmm. But speaking of events, a lot of Flesh and Blood this weekend.
There's so much to look at. It's impossible to keep on top of it all.
Yeah, I know.
I missed so much gameplay that I wanted to see.
Well, I mean, you could. I actually saw somebody post on, I think it was the general fan page, like what a great weekend. That like 24/7 there was something being streamed. Because I know like right as like on day 1 or day 2 of U.S. Nationals was wrapping up, Malaysia Nationals was starting up, and then you could just watch into the night. I elected to sleep outside of watching U.S. coverage, but we have a breakdown here. Unfortunately, we weren't able to find all the metadata for all the events. I think we'll get obviously the LSS breakdown later on this week. I would expect probably Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, something like that. But the data we were able to find for some of the smaller events, so we had in Spain, we had Bolton winning. We had a Briar pulling it out in Portugal. In Germany, we had Briar. In Norway, we had Dory. That's interesting, a little different. Bulgaria was Bravo. Switzerland was Bravo. Austria was Briar. And then going down, I've got a little bit more metadata for France and Malaysia. I just flipped the right page here in my notes. So in Malaysia, they had 25 total players. 6 on Dorinthia, 6 on Briar, 3 on Reinar, 3 on Bravo, 2 on Prism, 1 on Katsu, 1 on Dash, 1 on Azalea, 1 on Chain, and 1 on Lexi, with Dash taking out the Malaysian Nationals. And then for France, we had 11 Briars, 3 Dash, 4 Reinar, 3 Levia, 2 Katsu, 3 Chains, 2 Dories, a Kano, 2 Viserais, 2 Prisms, 2 Bravos, 2 Lexis, and 2 Old Hymns. And I believe for France, it was Briar taking that one out. And then that leaves us with our American events. Before we dip into the main American stuff, do you, Andrew, have any thoughts on kind of the meta share from those smaller events?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised to see kind of a higher number of like Bravos, and I expected more Prisms.
Yeah.
I did not expect the amount of Briar that we're seeing across all of these events. It is cool to see like the Dorinthia win and the Dash win. That's really spicy. I was hoping for like some sick Levia win or Reinar or Kano or something. That would have been cool to see.
Yeah. And like, I know one thing I've noticed about some of those more do I dare say fringe metas, or like just those places where there isn't as big of a player base. I've definitely noticed some of the meta can be influenced by just what people are loyal to. Like, I mean, like the Dorinthia win, for example, like that's probably a meta where someone is just in love with the Dorinthia character, and they're just dedicated to play it. And we seem to see a little more of that in the Asian metas, some of the more Eastern European metas. It's more so, I guess, from what I've seen kind of in the Western European metas and in North America and New Zealand and Australia, where people seem to play the meta more so.
Yeah, especially here in Edmonton, I've noticed, and especially with Magic too, is people were so quick to hop on like this week's hot deck. Like, people would just buy full decks so fast. You'd see them on like a Monday night Magic event, and then by Wednesday they just have like the whole deck that just won something all sleeved up, ready to go. And they'll do this constantly year round. They're just constantly switching decks, buying the new hot deck.
Yeah, and I mean, Flesh and Blood comparatively to Magic, like Magic, to be able to jump on all the different decks is just, that is so expensive that I guess people
have oil money.
Yeah, maybe. But Flesh and Blood, thankfully, it is reasonable enough to have a play set of all the cards for the most part that it is possible to jump from one deck to the next currently. And if somebody stays on top of things, and as each set comes out, they update their collection.
I'm loving how fast it was for me to just collect 3 of every common, 3 of every rare, start replacing these all with foils now. Certain legendaries, you just need 1. It can go in multiple decks. Yeah. It's very different from like trying to keep up with, you know, the hot new Magic set.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't imagine we'll see the amount of sets like compared to Magic, where it seems like each week we're getting a new set. Flesh and Blood is release, their release schedule is a lot lighter, so it is possible to stay on top of the releases. And
yep, and they've done such a good job. Like, back to the metadata you were just sharing, for all of those events, like every hero's showing up, and the charts are pretty wide. There's a good range of almost everything showing up.
Yep.
It's like a person could reasonably almost play anything right now and do well.
Yep. With that being said, if we look at the American data now, out of I believe the player cap was 600 for U.S. nationals. Now, I don't know if all 600 players showed up, but out of that, we had a resounding 134 Briars show up.
That's insane.
Followed by 64 Bravos, 50 Prisms, 31 Katsus, 30 Dashes, 27 Chains, 23 Boltons, 16 Viserais, 15 Reinars, 11 Old Hymns, and then 22 in the other category. So that makes up like your Azaleas, your Kanos. Right away we see in our North American meta that people are a lot clearly more influenced by what is competitive. And I mean, makes sense. I think even through the historical Magic scene, we can see that where a lot of people who grind the scene in North America are they're going to play what's competitive, and
they had to grab all these first edition cards. They got, like Unlimited comes out, I think this week or next week coming up here.
Yeah, we're getting it on Friday here, the 12th.
Yeah, so these people that all showed up playing. Briar or Lexi or Oldham had to find their first edition legendaries, their cold foils, and
which, I mean, the print runs for, we know the print run for first edition Tales was a lot bigger. We don't know what it was, but we know it was bigger than previous sets. So it's becoming, it is feasible to get all your first edition cards you need. Now, if we look at the Briar holding the biggest share of the meta, a lot of the cards that are in the standard Briar list, there's very few that are actually out of Tales of Aria. I know I saw, I mean, there's some common and rare elemental cards, some fusion cards, but for the big expensive cards, I don't think, like, the legendary creepers, I think, is more, we see played more in chain than actually in
yeah, some people were just on the Snapdragon scalers, and it would just be Shock Charmers as the other only expensive Tails card to pick up,
which I think if you're gonna, especially like if you're playing a game plan where you're not blocking, if you're gonna choose between Shock Charmers or Grasp, I think Grasp is the preferred arm piece. Like, that block for 2 and then 1 is so good in so many situations.
Yep.
So, U.S. Nats, we saw Cody Williams on, or for top 8, we saw Cody Williams on Chain, Isaac Jensen on Ice Lexi, Dagon White on Briar, Jacob Boff on Briar as well, Michael Feng, our Cincinnati calling champion, on Chain, John Siadak on Briar, Tariq Patel on Briar, and Tyler Horsepool, the Vegas champion, on Briar as well. So big conversion from Briar there. No surprises with that. We saw, especially Tariq Patel. That's a name I've been hearing a lot of lately. I know the Arsenal Pass guys and Brendan Patrick speak highly of Tariq Patel. I know all throughout the weekend across the Nationals Channel Fireball stream, they were praising Tariq Patel quite highly. Tariq went 8-0 in the first day, which is super impressive. And
do you think he broke the meta? Everyone's talking about him right now.
That's the big question right now, is did Tariq Patel break the meta? I mean, he's the U.S. national champion. He, in this deck, people are saying he's the pioneer of the essentially the Flesh and Blood's first red deck wins. Like running, I think, well, I haven't actually personally, do you know how many blues are in the Tariq Patel list? Do you have it handy there?
Yes, there's 11 blues.
11 blues, and that's from an 80 card main deck, or 80 card
that's
total
correct.
deck.
Yeah. This is 73 cards.
Not including equipment.
Yeah.
Correct.
So there's 11 blues in that 73 cards.
That's insane. Like,
yep. And just 10 yellows. Everything else is red. We have 52 reds.
That is insane. But, from what I'm hearing, it sounds like he first showed this deck off about a month ago. I think it was in a ProQuest he played it in. It must have been, I would assume, Dallas. I don't have the data handy in front of me. But then from there, Matthew Felks picks up the list and takes it to a 15-0 win at the UK Nats. And I know since then, I heard in an interview that this past week, Tariq spent the week actually hanging out with Matt Rogers. They were refining the list, refining the game plan. I mean, you got to think that for all the upcoming nationals from here on out, and until somebody truly finds a solution to this deck, we're going to see this deck pop up all over the place.
Yep, at this U.S. Nationals here, of course, not everyone was on Tariq's exact list, but I saw someone posting about how Briar had the highest conversion rate from day 1s to day 2s as well, when you take into account the percentage of Briars that showed up compared to everything else and how many of them made it to day 2.
Now, we did see... Now, I think this is probably one of the coolest top 8s for U.S. Nats. We did see Ice Lexi make an appearance, and a lot of people... I know I saw on the Channel Fireball chat, the stream chat, a lot of people were saying Ice Lexi could be one of the, if not the answers to this Lightning Briar we're seeing.
Yeah. Well, the deck runs very lean. Like we said, it's like all red cards, and they're trying to go very wide with a lot of go again.
Yeah, a lot of zero cost red cards where you don't need to pitch red. So in theory, Lexi, Ice Lexi, Frostbite tokens just disrupt, like huge disruption, forcing you to discard cards, forcing your cards to cost more than you want them to.
Yeah,
so many,
making things lose go again.
Now, with that being said, the quarterfinals match, we had Dagan White against Isaac Jessen, or Ice Lexi.
Yeah, very close match.
Oh, what a nail biter that one was. Ice Lexi, Isaac, for a good chunk of the game, he had just huge control of the game, and I mean, everybody thought it was a decisive win.
Yeah.
And then he whiffs on a 3 of a kind turn, doesn't draw a single arrow, and Deegan recognizes that as his opportunity to pivot, and ends up shutting out Ice Lexi and taking the win from having 2 health left. Like,
yeah, just got all the tempo back. Just came in with so much pressure every turn.
And like, I mean, even Ice Lexi being on Voltaire, which I don't disagree with, but I would have thought Shiver to be the better choice for Ice Lexi personally. I think even if he'd just been able to pump out 1 dominated attack, that would have been enough to close it out.
Yeah, I think so too.
But the part I want to highlight about that, and this is where so many pros, aspiring pros, can find their wins, is playing to your outs. And I think that is a huge takeaway from that match, is that how many people would have been in Deegan's shoes and would have thought this is it, and might have even scooped. And he just kept sticking with it and just kept trying to block as good as he could until he found that window to turn it around.
Yep.
And I think that is, to anybody, especially like going into the rest of the Nationals this season and going into our incredible lineup of 2022 events, don't give up. If this isn't Magic, where you turn 4, haven't drawn a land, and your opponent has a full board, like there's always an opportunity to turn it around.
Yep, in Flesh and Blood, what matters a lot more than your life total is how many cards you're playing per turn versus how many cards they're playing per turn. If you get that tempo back where you're just handing out tons of pressure and they have to start blocking with 2 or 3 or 4 cards a turn, then you get to just keep doing that as long as you can keep the pressure up. They have to just drop and pass back to you, and you get to just do it again. Yeah,
and that can be, once you get your opponent on the back foot, that can be what it takes to close out a game. But I wanted to highlight that match because I thought that one was just a great example of, so many different concepts in Flesh and Blood. And Lexi Ice, I know a lot of people were saying they're thinking that can be an answer to this Briar epidemic. And I think after seeing Isaac lose the way he did, unfortunately, as hard it is as it is to see a loss like that, I think a lot of people are probably going to be scared away from Ice Lexi for that reason. Mm-hmm. Now, we did have an Oldheim win in the U.S. calling, and we'll touch on that more, but I think people might look to that as an answer to Briar and to these red line decks. I mean, Chain, less red line, but still playing on a lot of zero cost cards and playing on a resource efficient game plan. So that is something that could possibly disrupt our meta. And
yeah, I think Chain is the only deck that can come very close to erasing this Briar deck, and then their equipment blocks for 10.
Yeah.
Which is just huge, and that can give them the edge, as well as if you're hitting those soul shackles, they start to get a little bit stronger in the mid to late game, Whereas like this Briar list, it doesn't get any stronger the farther the game goes on. It's just very low to the ground, aggro. It's trying to do the same thing from turn 1 to till the game's over.
Yeah, I think you can almost even think of your like Chain at this point as I would call him a mid-range deck. He can have some very aggro openings, but he's not looking to finish the game as quickly as possible. He's looking to, in the early game, probably make some blocks. I mean, having Carrion Husk is so good, and he's looking to extend the game to the point where he does start banishing 4, 5, 6 cards in that mid to late game, hopefully hitting those strong banishes and being able to close out the game with an attack that just overwhelms the opponent.
Yeah, for sure. Like, Chain very much plays like an aggro deck, but it just gets so much stronger in the mid game. It's nuts. I've never seen an aggro deck work that way before in any game I've ever played. Normally, aggro is strongest in the first couple turns, and then they start getting weaker, and people that can survive to the late game beat the aggro deck there. And Chain's very interesting that way.
Yeah, and I think let's come back to Chain a little bit there in a moment. I do want to finish on this part for like talking about Briar. Now I know, thanks to the list we've gotten from Tariq Patel and seeing as many people on Briar as we have, some people are starting to ask the question, does Briar need to be banned? Now I do have a few thoughts on this, but first, what do you think there, Andrew?
I like to wait a couple months and try to let the people figure it out on themselves. Games are really fun when the meta's evolving like every day, and the community has to, crack the code, find the answers, change things up, tweak their game plan, find new sideboard cards, find some way to be able to come on top of the new meta as they change day to day. So I don't like when companies just, ban something right away before the community gets a chance at cracking the code. Yeah,
and it's kind of my thought as well. I think it's too soon for any kind of ban. Furthermore, when we look at the Chain bannings, when we look at Seeds of Agony getting banned, that was one like easily identifiable card that was a problem. Mm-hmm. When you look at the Briar list, I don't think there's a single card that stands out. It's not a problem card, it's a strategy. And yeah, you're right. Like, we need to give the meta a chance to really respond to this. And when you look at all the different heroes winning the big events, like, this is honestly actually Briar's only second win. We've seen Prism win. Briar wasn't around for Prism's win in Vegas, but Prism was able to overcome a huge adversary in Chain, and then throughout the limited callings, we actually saw when everybody expected Briar to win, then we saw a control strategy prevail. And now, with that being said, do you know off the top of your head what Michael Feng won on in Cincinnati?
No, I forget.
All right, I
didn't see what he was playing in Cincinnati,
but looking at like the Pro Quests, Prism winning, and then Bravo winning, and then more recently, and these events this weekend, Old Him winning in the calling in Orlando. Aggro is very strong in this game, but aggro is beatable. I think that's a huge takeaway, is that when we actually as a community set our minds to it to try to figure out how to beat something, it's very possible. So I expect Briar to be very prevalent going into this next weekend of nationals. I know we've got our Canadian Nats. I don't know off the top of my head what the other nationals going this upcoming weekend are, but Canada's going to be a big one as well. Canada's got a lot of big players, and I think it's safe to say that the Briar, do I keep calling it a Briar epidemic?
Yeah, I found the answer to your question.
Oh,
too.
yeah.
Sorry to cut you off. It looks like it was draft.
But I knew it was draft. I just didn't know what hero it was on.
Yeah, he was on Oldhim, and he beat Tariq Patel, who was
no
on
way.
Briar. Yeah.
So there you go. So, and that once again reinforces the point that Briar is beatable. Now, I think for anybody going into Canadian Nats, you have a big question on your hand. do you run Briar? Do you try to race everybody? Do you try to win that way? Or do you try to beat Briar? I think, once again, like any event, meta call is what, first and foremost, I think defines who's going to have a good chance at winning that event. And with Briar being as popular as she is, this coming weekend,
it's an important question to ask.
Yeah.
And I think it comes down to a player's personality too. Like if you really like control decks, or you've put a ton of time into Bravo or something, then, maybe bringing an ice Oldham strategy to try to shut down Briar, take away the go again, slow him down, that could work really well for you. If you're more of an aggro player, then you have to decide if you want to also bring the Briar deck and maybe play mirror matchups all day, or if you want to try racing it with like a aggro Katsu or a chain deck or something.
Yeah. And I know like chain is one people thought was dead, and
not I.
Yeah,
I knew.
I know you're like we know you're a devout chain main, but like looking at, for USA Nats, out of 27 chains that showed up, 2 made top 8.
Yeah.
Michael Fang and where's the other one on my list here? Cody Williams and Michael Fang making it all the way to the finals. And that right there, I think, is a huge show. Well, and even in the Cincinnati Pro Quest, like we saw Chain do very well there as well. So Chain is still relevant, and Chain clearly can duke it out with Briar.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see other people's takes on it too. We're seeing like a couple different lists. There's a lot of Chain players bringing this minimalism belittle package. There's other Chain players who aren't, and I'm excited to see a lot of deck lists that come out of this weekend.
Yeah, no, I am too, and I'm excited to see. I mean, I'm excited for us going to Nats. It's going to be such a fun time.
I'm so stoked. I'm ready to go right now.
Well, we got a couple days still, flying out on Thursday. I know the rest of it, it's already late in the Sunday here, but I think we're probably going to run a couple matches after we're done recording this.
Yep.
But Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, like for me, that's testing time. Like, well, I've been testing up into this point as well, but trying to just solidify our game plan, solidify our decks, and figure out what we want to play this coming weekend.
I'm going to have a busy week, though. I've got 2 big school assignments due. I've got a bunch of chores to take care of, stuff to get done, got to pack. There's a lot to do before we leave Thursday afternoon.
That's fair. Meanwhile, I'm lucky. I actually just went on some vacation here from work, so I've got the next month off. I can just focus on, this week, focus on Nats, and then just for the rest of the month, focus on the podcast, focus on Flesh and Blood. I know we've got skirmish season starting once our Nats is done, so I got that to look forward to. Mind you, whereas the skirmish season 1 and skirmish season 2 were a big deal because we didn't have all these pro level events happening. This skirmish season feels a lot more laid back, and I think it's going to be more what LSS set out for the skirmish season idea to be, that entry level competitive event. But I mean, I'm looking forward to it. Skirmish season's always a good time. I know you haven't even had the chance to experience a skirmish season yet.
Yeah, I'm excited. I haven't seen one.
And you won't. I mean, like there are some online, and I guess for those players who do jam online games, there are a few online skirmishes this season as well. But a lot of them are moving to the in-store model, which I think that also changes it changes the competitiveness. You're not going to have as many people enrolled for some of them. Like, I mean, I think there were some skirmishes that were like 100 and some people plus. I remember one of the skirmishes crashing the gem software. Like,
that's nuts.
And like this skirmish season is going to be a lot more laid back, but it's going to be a good time. Like, skirmish season is where people find out like if this is what they want to play on a competitive level or not. So, and you know what? This skirmish season's also going to be fun because we actually get to draft. That's not something we got to do in the past. But just quickly here, let's touch on, so we all, at this point, we're all well aware with the controversy out of UK Nationals, and we're not going to touch on it for too long. But we did get an investigation from LSS. We got a verdict, and now LSS was intentionally vague, and that's fine. With their ruling, they told us that a player got a warning for unsportsmanlike conduct. We don't know who that is. We don't know what. I mean, there was one player in particular who exhibited a whole lot of stuff, but we did see some misplays and some issues from a few different players throughout UK Nats. So we can't speculate, nor should we. We know somebody got a warning, and I know a lot of people weren't happy with the verdict. They were hoping for more, and I'm. What are your thoughts on this, Andrew?
Well, kind of going back to what I said last time, my thing is that the onus should be on the players to call judges at the time when the thing has just happened, when you're sitting there at the table. And, you know, if there was a record of many judge calls on the event and like lots of warnings, then LSS would have more information to go off of. And I like how they touched on what they expect coming out of players and online spectators and judges and stuff for the future. Like, I really liked the article that they wrote, and they addressed it rather quickly, and I pretty much agreed with everything they said. So
yeah, and
that was good to see.
I mean, I second that. It's very hard to do things retroactively. It's very hard to, after the fact, come back. And now we had really good documentation and really good footage for UK Nats, but regardless, it is very hard after the fact to turn around and retroactively do something. I think the precedent at this point has been made very clear. LSS has told us what to expect, and for everything we've seen and we've been told, you can bet that there was more communications behind the scene. Like the judging community probably got some huge debrief that we as the general public are not privy to. And I think the precedent has been set on multiple levels. I think judges have a much better idea on how to judge. I think players have a much better idea on what's expected of them. And I even think we already have seen the byproduct of that. I mean, US Nats was, from what I saw at least, fairly clean. I think there was a lot of clean play throughout that. Now I did hear, and unfortunately I don't have all the details on this either, I did hear there was a report of some cheating out of French nationals, but you know what? From what I've heard, the player was immediately disqualified. Now I don't know how egregious or blatant it was, but regardless, I'm willing to bet that there is an element of UK nationals having an impact on that, and that judge probably, based off communications either directly or indirectly, was empowered and given the confidence to make the right call. And I hope moving forward we're going to see more clean play and more good judge calls. And I think a big takeaway for the community is don't be afraid to A, hold your opponent accountable, B, read your opponent's cards, C, call a judge if you feel you need a judge. I know Andrew last week said like that's what the judges are here for. They're here to help us play the game justly, and yeah, don't be afraid to use them as a resource.
Yeah, and US Nationals was really clean and crisp, especially moving farther into the tournament, like day 2 onwards and stuff. A lot of these familiar faces that we recognize from other events, like they play so calmly, smoothly, correctly, placing things out there. They're using dice to let the spectators know how much damage is being dealt, or if things are coming in as some arcane and some physical. People are calling judges on themselves and they're fixing stuff. Like, everything seemed to go really smoothly. People weren't afraid to call judges. The coverage was really good. The casting was really good. Stream quality was great.
Yeah, I know on one of the days they were having some issues, I think with some connectivity stuff, unfortunately, but I imagine that's out of CFB's control. I remember seeing somebody in the chat comment jokingly saying, like, I know the US has bad internet, but like this is ridiculous. And yeah, I think there were things out of their control, but beyond that, like like I said, we only caught the US coverage, but it was really well done. And the commentary was phenomenal. A lot of good casters. CFB has done a really good job recruiting really talented people. I know, like Stephen, our DM Armada, Tan and Grace. We are closer to home for us. Flake, Matt DeMarco, they all did a phenomenal job. Red Zone Rogue was great. Saw they had Matt Rogers on for some of it this time around, and he's clearly having such fun just being on stream. And no, everybody did a phenomenal job there. I do want to touch on this quickly because I forgot to mention it before. So just to break down the top 8 meta for the US calling, because we didn't mention it, we had Dante on Briar. We had Quinn Wongku on Bravo. I apologize if I mess up any of these names. Joshua Kehe on Chain. Jordan Nell on Briar. Matt Rogers on Viscerai. Joel Repta on Briar. Michael Hamilton on Oldhim. And Jonathan Manguson on Oldhim. Out of that, it ended up being Michael Hamilton and Joel Repta in the finals, Oldhim versus Briar, and Michael Hamilton was the one who was able to take out the win there. Michael Hamilton being the USA calling champion for Orlando. Big congrats to him. We also, for the ProQuest, we had, unfortunately, I don't have all great data on this one either. There's too much flesh and blood this weekend is what it came down to. Nobody could just stay on top of everything. It's bonkers. Like, I don't know if and when we'll have another weekend like this jam-packed with stuff. But we did have, 232 players playing, with Zach Bunn pulling the win out at the ProQuest. For those of you who don't know, Zach Bunn is one of the founders of the Team Covenant brand, I guess, for lack of a better term. They make content, they stream, they're also a store. A lot of people probably don't even know, like, they're a huge reason why Flesh and Blood is as big as it is in North America. They're one of the first companies to take a shot on Flesh and Blood, and we have them to thank in part for why it is what it is at this point. So huge congrats to Zach Bunn. Huge congrats to everyone pulling out a win this weekend. That it's just awesome for everyone. I think that's it on the agenda for this week. Andrew, did you have anything to kind of wrap up here?
No, it's our turn to go win our nationals.
Yeah.
Are you ready to slog through the Runeblade trenches?
Oh, well, I think in part you got to decide, do you try to beat them or do you join them? And
we'll probably decide the day before.
Yeah, I mean, sleeve up everything throughout the week. Just see what feels best, and that's all we can do.
Yeah, but if you want to follow our team of people that we're traveling with, our Twitter at the Combat Chain, I'm going to be posting all of our records at the end of every round. As long as I've got my phone and it's alive, we're gonna make some content as well for the channel, and we're gonna be in Toronto.
Yeah. So keep an eye out for that. We'll be some regular updates. I know we're still in the process of figuring out some of our social media platforms we're going to use for and how we're going to update things. But you know what? We'll as we figure it out, we will post it in the drop down box on the YouTube page. So keep your eyes peeled there. We'll let you guys know as things get figured out. But until next week, thanks for tuning in, and we're closing the combat chain.